Good morning, everyone. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you all to World Travel Market 2014. My name's Paul Nelson. I'm the Press and PR Manager for the WTM portfolio. And for those of you who don't know, that includes today's event here in London, but also out in Sao Paulo for WTM Latin America, down in Cape Town for World Travel Market Africa, and in Dubai for Arabian Travel Market. So, as I said, welcome to World Travel Market, and here we are at the unveiling of the World Travel Market 2014 Industry Report. So this is now the 5th industry report that we've done. We started it back in 2010, and it's quite a unique report in the sense that it reflects the fears and the opportunities and what's actually going on downstairs in the exhibition floor and the conversations that our exhibitors and our buyers are having as they sign their business deals over the next 4 days, which will lead to what we predict to be around £2.5 billion worth of business that the guys will conduct as they have their negotiations throughout the next 4 days. So this report polls those buyers and it polls those exhibitors, 5,000 of our exhibitors, and we've got a selection of those within the report. And then we've cross-referenced that with holidaymakers. So you can see there on the slide 1,229, just over 1,000 holidaymakers from the UK. So we're able to see what the industry thinks and then cross-reference that with what the UK holidaymakers and consumers think. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to Stephen Sacker, BBC presenter, who will take you through the report before we have a Q&A at the end with some experts from within the travel industry. Stephen.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. Good morning, everybody. If you came last year, you'll remember I did this last year. So I obviously did it with enough competence to get an invite back. So I get to talk you through the report. The report then is obviously out, and you're all going to, I hope, get copies at the end of this session. But we're going to tempt you with a few nuggets before you actually get your hands on the real thing. So let's just go through it a little bit. There are 7 chapters in the 2014 industry report. There you've got them all outlined. It starts with a sort of sum up of the mood of the industry. How much optimism is there right now? Surprisingly, there's perhaps more than you'd think, given the way the world's been working for the last year. There's a special look at peer-to-peer travel and the implications of the growth in that. Something very close to my heart, because I, every year, come back and host the World Responsible Tourism Awards. We've got a special section on responsible tourism this year. There's a look at the aviation business, which is fast changing, a difficult place to make money right now, but people are making money with the right offer, so we'll look at what trends in aviation. Sports tourism is a big thing. WTM this year is going to have quite a lot of discussion of the importance of sports tourism as a driver of the tourism business for cities and indeed for countries. There's a special focus on the United Kingdom, not surprisingly given our location and the nature of this survey. We'll be looking at the growth of staycations, that new term that we've all grown very used to recently. Consideration of the political climate here in the UK with elections in 2015 as well. And then finally, there's going to be a little sort of peer into the future. It's 35 years of WTM, and we're actually going to use that as an opportunity to look forward to the next 35 years and imagine what tourism might look like across the world in 2049. So a bit of futurology as well. So that's pretty much what's in the report. Let's go through it in some detail. I talked about the mood in the industry. Well, here you see, actually, given how horrible so much of world events is, and goodness knows as a news journalist I'm very well aware of that, the mood in the business as to where business is going is pretty good. Paul just mentioned the hopes for WTM this year. It's always a place where lots of deals are done. They reckon last year 2.2 billion quid's worth of deals were done in and around WTM. This year, the hope is it'll go higher to about 2.5 billion. And according to the surveys, there is a deal of optimism about the state of the business and where global tourism is going. So that is encouraging. Peer-to-peer travel is one specific thing we're going to be looking at. That, of course, is taking off in a big way. You see some of the brand names there, Airbnb, HomeAway, house trip, this really is taking off, and people do appear to like it, particularly in the United States. 14% of all US travelers, apparently, are now using the peer-to-peer sites. The industry report shows that in the UK, the figure is closer to 1 in 10, 10% UK holidaymakers already looking at peer-to-peer, but 85% saying that they will, in the future, look at peer-to-peer options. So clearly that is a real growth area. In terms of where it leaves traditional travel businesses, well, frankly, I don't think it's a great surprise to learn they are concerned. Noel Josephides, who's the chairman of ABTA, has talked about the black economy, saying, and essentially saying that, you know, so many of these businesses at local level don't pay their taxes, are freed up from much of the regulation that governs the tourism business as a whole, and that ain't fair. Well, that's something that I think a lot of execs and travel industry insiders are thinking about and worrying about. 1 in 5 say that their businesses have been affected by peer-to-peer business. 2/3 of those say that the impact upon them has been negative. So the traditional industry, if I can put it that way, is clearly concerned about the growth of peer-to-peer, and we'll talk about that in our panel discussion. Okay, the market report second chapter looks at responsible tourism. This is something, as I say, that I know a little bit about because I've been lucky enough over the last 6 years or so to host the World Responsible Tourism Awards here at WTM. Businesses around the world doing fantastic work in this area. So many more businesses, it seems, now take seriously the idea that they have to be responsible and sustainable in the way that they run their tourism operations. Just to give you some quick figures from the surveys, 86% of industry executives say that responsible tourism is now important to their business plan. 1 in 2 describe it as either, quote, central or very important. A further 2/3 say that they believe it'll become more important over the next 3 years. So, you know, you can see the trend. People hopefully are not just talking the talk, they're also walking the walk. Hope so. Now, this isn't just about the people sort of running businesses, it's also about the people consuming the tourism products. Holidaymakers do say, and you know, I suppose some of them may just say this because it makes them feel better and feel more responsible, but they say that they do care about what sort of holiday they take in terms of its environmental credentials. 36% say they do take a look at the environmental record of businesses in this sector before they make a booking, and one would hope that that is both true but also a figure that's going to grow. Aviation is an important part of the whole travel and tourism business. Now, there are various different things that the report goes into, which are very current right now. One is this much debated issue of the UK's airport capacity. Will Heathrow be the solution in terms of a new runway, or will it be Gatwick, or will it be some combination of the two plus boosting regional airports? Well, the report does look at where that argument sits right now, and it has to be said that in terms of the Heathrow option, which I suppose one could describe as perhaps the most obvious in terms of Heathrow's status as Britain's #1 sort of hub airport, the feeling seems to be that the Heathrow option is perhaps moving away a little bit. These days, industry insiders see it as neck and neck between Heathrow and a Gatwick or regional airport expansion option. So Heathrow is less obviously seen as the solution now. And in terms of the people who use airports, holidaymakers, support for Heathrow expansion, as you can see, is actually on a downward trend. 2012, 34% of the holidaymakers surveyed supported Heathrow expansion as the number one option, and that now went to 19%, 1 in 5 basically in 2013, and is lower than that now at just 16%. So the supporters of Heathrow might want to think about that, because at the moment they don't seem to be winning the hearts and minds of holiday makers. Another important aspect of aviation that we'll be talking about is the balance between the so-called legacy carriers and the low-cost carriers. Now, perhaps the best known, or certainly the most best used, I think, in raw passenger numbers of the low-cost carriers, although EasyJet might quarrel with me. But anyway, Ryanair are certainly a big player. I don't know if anybody heard Michael O'Leary on the radio or the telly this morning. His latest results are out, and I think profits are up 32%, I think I heard on my radio on the way in. So he's had a rough time. As you will know, Ryanair has suffered a series of terrible sort of publicity gaffes. Michael O'Leary himself was seen to be sort of too bullying, too overbearing, too negative, and essentially saying to holidaymakers and customers, you know, like it or lump it. Well, because his figures weren't so good, he's changed tack. He's now a sort of nicer, sweeter, calmer Michael O'Leary, less swearing, more sugar-coated stuff. And more specifically and more seriously, they're offering, you know, a second bag for free option. They're offering a slightly improved sort of service. They say that their fares are just as competitive as ever, and it seems to be paying off to a certain extent. So we'll be talking about Ryanair, the low-cost carriers, and the future of the aviation business. Air passenger duty, always a big bugbear for people inside this industry. The IATA chief has described it as the most egregious example of excessive taxation. The only bit of good news from the industry's point of view that the market report goes into is the UK government's scrapping of the 2 highest long-haul bands of air passenger duty, and there's discussion of what difference, if any, that will make to the choices people make in terms of holiday travel. It may make some difference to these sorts of destinations. Again, the Holidaymakers survey pointed to these sorts of destinations as potential long-haul beneficiaries of the cut in air passenger duty at the top end. Surveys suggest that, you know, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Japan, Vietnam, China, India, all seen as potential destinations by a significant number of holidaymakers in 2015. Now, sports tourism. Well, it seems ages since the London Olympics, doesn't it? But I think the London Olympics did show that a huge sporting event can be a driver of visitor number growth. But it's obviously not just about London. There's key global sporting events all over the world. We'll be assessing, the report looks at and assesses the impact of sports tourism as a sort of motive force for growing tourism businesses. 7 out of 10 execs apparently believe that Rio, for example, will be a beneficiary with increases in bookings after the World Cup. Obviously not from England fans, because it doesn't leave a very sweet taste in our mouths, but maybe if you're German, you're dying to get to Brazil to see the scene of the triumph. I don't know. Anyway, sports tourism is a really big deal, so we'll be looking at that. One really interesting positive example, I think, from this past year was the Tour de France in the UK, which did a huge amount of good for visitor numbers in the north, for example. If you remember, the race kicked off in Yorkshire. It was also huge in Essex and the southeast of England. Numbers of people flocking to the routes of the race. And it seems really giving a boost to the tourism business. So we'll be having a look at that. There you go. More than half of the trade believe Yorkshire is going to be a long-term beneficiary from hosting the start of the Tour de France. But, you know, it's not all straightforward. I mean, I don't think you can say just because you've got a big sporting event in a particular place in the world you're automatically going to see a huge gain. It depends what your offer is beyond the sporting event, which brings me to two countries which perhaps have a somewhat mixed offer right now. One, quite obviously, is Russia, where they had the Sochi Winter Olympics, but is that going to pay off in a rise in tourism numbers? Well, according to the survey, 2/3 of people believe there won't be much of a positive spin-off for Sochi. Now, why could that be? Well, I can think of a few reasons. Some connected with Vladimir Putin and his policies in Ukraine, and towards democracy and freedom and human rights. Who knows? But the relationship isn't obviously straightforward. As I say, the other one that raises questions, which some of you may be thinking about in your businesses, is Qatar. World Cup's going to be there in 2022. Does that mean Qatar's going to have a surge in visitor interest and visitor numbers? Well, who knows? But certainly the run-up publicity so far to Qatar 2022 isn't entirely positive. So we'll have to see whether fans will go to the event in huge numbers, but also whether there'll be a longer-term knock-on effect as well. Okay, UK issues, obviously covered well in the report. One UK issue that's interesting, I don't know if people from around the world have this in their countries, but in the UK there is now legislation to tell parents that they cannot take their kids out of school during term time to go on holiday, and if they do, they get fined. So the report looks at the impact of this. Apparently, almost 4 in 10 parents still say they're prepared to take their child out of school for a holiday, and almost half think that the idea that they would be fined for that is plain wrong. So it's not a hugely popular policy, it seems, with the British public. And talking of policies and what's popular, that brings us, in a sense, to politics in the UK. There is a degree of uncertainty here because of the next election being in 2015, and anybody who follows British politics knows it's all up for grabs. Interestingly, 2 in 10 holidaymakers, I mean, I don't know how seriously you can take this, but maybe you can, 2 in 10 say that their vote might be affected by a party that was prepared to ditch this policy of fining you for taking your kids out of school for a holiday. Seems a slightly weird way to settle a UK election, but you never know. Depends how desperate for votes they are, and frankly, they're all desperate for votes, so you'll probably find them all sort of outbidding each other to give people bonuses for taking their kids out of school on holiday. Who knows? Anyway, it's an interesting sort of little sidelight on that particular piece of legislation, isn't it? I don't know if you all care about these things. I suppose we all care to a certain extent. Certainly if we're UK voters, we ought to. Again, Paul mentioned the survey talking to, over 1,000 holidaymakers. Well, here you have a very unscientific poll of their political beliefs or positions right now. The Tories and Labour pretty much neck and neck. UKIP, well, there's maybe no surprise anymore. UKIP doing rather well, and poor old Nick Clegg and the Lib Dems not scoring high amongst holidaymakers. Do you want to know what the number is? The number for the Lib Dems is a stonking 5%. The Greens aren't there. So much for... Yeah, well, you know, who knows? Screaming Lord Such isn't there either with his monster raving loony party. But anyway, listen, it's not scientific. It's just what holidaymakers said to the pollster. But things are going to change. I can guarantee you that. It won't just stay exactly like that till election day. But anyway, it gives you a little idea of the uncertainty in British politics right now, which I think is going to take us all the way through to May of 2015. Now, I mentioned this word staycation, which is no longer a new word. It's been around for a while. The UK is full of people, it seems, who think they're going to holiday in the UK next year. I think, again, I heard on the radio this morning that we're all set to have the warmest year on record, pretty much, this year. It's been a pretty warm year. People like that. warm weather helps them believe that it's worthwhile staying at home. And also, frankly, when economic times are tough, it's cheaper to stay at home for many people. So this year's report shows that more than a third of all those polled will holiday in the UK next year. Why? Well, as I said, the weather's a factor, although frankly you'd think the weather might be a factor pushing them away, but this year's been quite nice, so the law of averages says next year will be really horrible, but people don't think that way, do they? So people are quite keen on the weather because it's been quite nice, but I think more significantly, affordability. That is a big factor in people saying they're going to stay home. 6 out of 10 saying affordability is very important to their decision to take a UK-based home holiday. So obviously UK number one on the list of destinations there. But number two is the good old USA. The industry report goes into a few possible explanations. One is Florida apparently is having a major push on its theme parks, new rides, new investments, new wacky, thrilling experiences for everybody. So that may be attracting people. And then this, going back to this air passenger duty thing, it is true to say that actually America doesn't really benefit from the cuts of the top bands of APD for long haul, because America doesn't qualify as truly long haul. But nonetheless, I think people are aware that there have been a few changes making it a little bit more economical to fly long haul, and maybe the popularity of America is partly driven by that, even though, frankly, practically, it's not going to make any difference to flying to America. Okay, I don't know, hands up, how many of you, when you go on holiday, absolutely make it a rule not to read email, to be connected, to have the office on your back, or indeed your mother-in-law, or anybody else? How many people want to leave their tablets and mobile phones at home? Well, yeah, you're 2 or 3 brave souls. Congratulations to you. Your work-life balance is fantastic. The rest of you, you're sad people. Get a life. Okay, here, 4 out of 10, this is the workaholics amongst you, say that access to Wi-Fi is hugely important and has a big impact on your booking decision. You're the people who just can't bear to be out of touch. Obviously, that suggests 6 out of 10 actually don't mind being out of touch, which isn't what our room is telling us. But anyway, it's a big deal now, and I think, tourism businesses have to think about what sort of technology they offer. They clearly know that Wi-Fi is very important, if only because people love to boast about what brilliant times they're having on holiday, like this happy couple. Look at them. They look so incredibly happy and in love. So they must be having a fantastic holiday, and they must want to tell all their friends about it immediately. So braggies, as they're called, not selfies, but braggies, are apparently big now for holiday makers. And the business needs to make sure they've got Wi-Fi so they can brag to all of their friends and indeed enemies. And I think the Global Trends report that WTM is issuing at 1 p.m., and I think Caroline's involved with that, who's on our panel, that's going to go quite a lot into technology, social media, and the holiday experience. So do make sure you're across that a bit later on. Okay, I haven't brought a crystal ball with me, but I'm glad to say one of our panelists regularly uses his. Ian Yeoman is a sort of holiday business futurologist, and we're going to tap into his visions for the future. As I said, there's 35 years of business at WTM, and we're going to look ahead to what might be the shape of this industry in 2049, 35 years on from now. What sort of trends and experiences and realities might we be dealing with then? So here's just one little thought that features in the report. What is the future for the good old passport? well, given our obsession with talking about immigration and visas and rules right now, maybe it's not the greatest time to be talking about chucking away passports, but the fact is, a lot of people inside the industry see that the passport and border crossings as we know them are going to change dramatically over the next 35 years, that essentially national borders will be dominated by fingerprint technology as opposed to the presentation of an old-style passport. 8 out of 10 industry execs say that they believe this will be happening by 2049. 2/3 of holidaymakers also think that the passport might be outdated as a means of international travel by 2049. Now, here's the thing. This morning isn't perhaps the most fortuitous time to be talking about the importance of space travel. I shouldn't laugh. I mean, it's obviously a horrible thing that's happened to Richard Branson's Virgin Space Initiative. But let us not forget that, you know, an awful lot of money and serious investment is going into this idea that in the long run, in the long term, people are going to be attracted, those with money at least, to the notion of space tourism. And I don't think one test site crash in the United States is going to put an end to that. The question is, are industry execs really buying into this? Well, you can look at this one or two ways. 34% apparently of execs in the travel business believe that space tourism will be, you know, a significant part of the business by 2014, that it is serious, in other words. But of course the flip side of that is that 2/3, 66%, don't really see it as something that is on the horizon for 2049 at all. So it's an interesting debate, but of course coloured by what has happened in the last few days. It certainly hasn't brought that prospect any closer in terms of appealing to the general public, I don't think. Okay, what else? If you're thinking, you know, sort of blue sky thinking, what else might be happening in the travel business 35 years from now? Well, more than half of holidaymakers apparently expect holographic reps to be their sort of point of contact in resorts by 2049. I don't know whether that's deemed to be good news or bad news. Would you like to be sort of guided through your holiday by a hologram? I don't know. Given the nature of some of the reps, probably you would. Anyway, it's something to think about. I'm just looking at the figures here. Apparently, 1 in 6 members of the trade thinks that holograms will be important as holiday reps by 2040. I don't know what they've been drinking when they come up with some of this stuff. But anyway, holidaymakers a bit more sceptical. 13% think that this is a possibility by 2049. Okay, well there you go. We've gone through everything from real-time issues facing us in this business today to a glimpse into possibilities for the future. Of course, you're all going to get your hands on the market report very soon, but before you do, we thought it would be nice just to chew over some of these issues in a bit more detail with an expert panel. So I'm going to invite my panel onto the stage. Let me introduce you to all of them and then give them all collectively a big warm hand as they come up here. So Caroline